welcome to this book club edition of Inner Mastery. We are in the midst of A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. We're finishing out chapter 5, all about the pain body. So if you have ever wondered why your family pushes your buttons, how they know exactly, like instinctually what to say and do to just set you off, and also why you know how to do it to them and why you get like a little bit of satisfaction when you do it. This is a really insightful episode. This chapter is really getting into the depths of why humans enjoy pain and why on some level even they like to be a victim or inflict pain on others. It's fascinating. It's necessary to shine the light of conscious awareness onto this topic so that we can collectively evolve and move through all of this. Now, if you're getting value from these book club sessions, please make sure you give this a review wherever you're listening to the podcast. Or if you're listening here on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, click the bell for notifications, and of course, like this video and share it with your friends. Hey there, Danielle Matthews here. I'm coming to you live from Florida. Today is Monday, so it is book club day, and we are in the midst of talking about this book, A New Earth, by Eckhart Tolle. It's fantastic. We're halfway through. We're going to be finishing out chapter 5. Now, I know last week I had a lot of connectivity issues. It says that my internet is perfect today, so let's set the intention that that stays for the next half hour. If you're joining live, let me know when you get here. If you're catching the replay, let me know that you're catching the replay. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments. I'm always over here looking at them, responding to them. And if you're on live with me, make sure that you are joining in the conversation. We're talking about the pain body. So Eckhart Tolle, in this chapter, the chapter is called The Pain Body, and it's talking about this aspect of ourselves that feeds on negative emotion. And we talked a lot about it last week and how it's most of the time dormant and when and how it gets stimulated. But where we kind of dropped off was how the pain body feeds on drama. And so I am curious, for those of you that are here, do you ever, well, let me ask it this way first. Does your family member or your loved ones, right, do they ever push your buttons? Do you ever, you know that term, like they push your buttons, like they just know what to do to like tick you off? They know exactly what to say, exactly how to say it, when to do it. They know it's going to make you get agitated, right? Do you have family members that know this? Put a 1 in the chat, yes. Or do you know it for your family members? This is a little bit more self-awareness and honesty, right? Put a 2 in the chat if you're aware of yourself doing it to people that you love. It's funny because sometimes it's like you feel like some sense of enjoyment out of like, oh yeah, I know how to push your button. I know how to make you do this, right? Kids are really good at doing that with their parents because they're constantly observing, right? Tina says 1 and 2. Yes, people do it to us and we do it to others. And actually in this chapter, that's what Eckhart Tolle really starts to break down. Like, what are these vulnerable points and how come just instinctually kids and even ourselves, we know where that is in somebody. Like, it's like we know that weak point. He says, it's hard to resist another person's pain body that is determined to draw you into reaction. So it is that person's pain body. The pain body, right, feeds on negative energy. And so when it comes out to eat, if you will, it comes out to feed, it needs negativity. And so it has to create situations where it can then feed on that negativity. And so pushing somebody's button, right, getting someone to be angry feeds it, right? That anger, it's like, yeah, it feels good on it. So he says it's very difficult to resist when someone is trying to basically push your buttons. They're trying to draw out a reaction. They're trying to draw out your pain body. He says, you know, raw emotion is just looking for another emotion. That's what the pain body is doing. And he says it's almost unbearably painful for young children to have to witness the emotional violence that their parents' pain bodies essentially inflict on one another. But that's the issue, the fate for millions of children. It's also one of the main ways in which the human pain body is passed on from generation to generation. So how many of you, when you were young, had parents that would fight and you would see a blow up, right? And a lot of times it's interesting because parents will blow up, right? And then they make amends, but typically they make amends in private. So like the kids watch a blow up and then they, you know, and then they're like, what's going on now? Everything's fine. Okay, but it's going to blow up again. Like they don't watch the coming together again, but also the coming together again is usually temporary. It's usually temporary. It's usually the ego letting, a little bit of settling down until the pain body takes over again, because the parents' pain bodies, if you're not aware of this, pain bodies are feeding on pain bodies. And this is where all of these intense, relationships, like these intense blow-ups. Like I have relationships, people very close to my circle, I'll say, that I'm aware, I'm around enough to see these things. I watch like an explosive volcano and then it settles down. And then an explosive volcano and then it settles down. And, you watch the kids see that. And the kids just, they don't know what to do. It's really intense for a child, right? They take it in. It's interesting. So most pain bodies, he says, want to either inflict pain or suffer pain. All right. But some are predominantly either the perpetrators or the victims. So interestingly, some people's pain bodies like to suffer. That negative emotion is good. They like to be the victim. The pain body does. And others like to be the perpetrators of it. They like to inflict suffering. They like to inflict pain. And now this is a hard thing to swallow. That because of this dynamic of perpetrator and victim, sometimes people will come into relationship and they feel drawn towards one another. And he talks about how they feel drawn toward one another like they're a match made in heaven, when really it's the pain bodies seeing the perfect other pain body to be able to feed from, right? Maybe one's a perpetrator, likes to inflict pain, and the other one likes to suffer. It likes to be victim, right? That's an abusive relationship. Why does the person stay? The pain body in some way likes it. Isn't that wild? Like, it's wild. Okay? Absolutely wild. And once you start to realize this, he says you start to realize that some of these, matches look like they're made in heaven are actually made in hell. And, the complementary nature of pain bodies can cause these intense dynamics. Power struggles at work, in families, maybe not your direct partner, but friendships. It's just interesting to watch. Like, why am I suffering, in this dynamic? Because on some level, that aspect, the pain body likes it. Wild. Okay? Like, wild. And it will usually animate itself in relationships. So, I wanted to read page 150 because I was reading this and I was like, man, it's true, right? Like when you first start dating someone, everything's, wonderful and beautiful. And then at some point, you see something else come out of the person. And he talks about how usually it's after someone gets married, signs a contract, and moves in with somebody. And they say, he describes it so beautifully. I'm just going to read it because I thought, I wonder how many people have experienced this. All of a sudden, her voice becomes harsh or shrill as she accuses you, blames you, or shouts at you, most likely over a relatively trivial matter. Or she becomes totally withdrawn. What's wrong, you might ask? Nothing's wrong, she says. But the intensely hostile energy she emits is saying everything is wrong. When you look into her eyes, there's no light in them anymore. It is as if a heavy veil has descended, and the being you know and love, which before was able to shine through her, and through her ego, is now totally obscured. A complete stranger seems to be looking back at you, and in her eyes there is hatred, hostility, bitterness, or anger. And when she speaks to you, it is not your spouse or partner who is speaking, but the pain body speaking through them. Has anyone experienced this? Where all of a sudden you're like, whew, like the face changes and you're like, this isn't you. Like, this is not you. I don't know who this is, but it's scary. And I'm leaving. Right? I've watched it happen. Many dynamics in my life. I've seen it happen. He says it's whatever that person is saying, it's the pain body's version of reality. Understand this, because this will help you not get triggered. Right? Because understand, it's the pain body's version of reality. A reality that is completely distorted by fear, hostility, anger, or a desire to inflict and receive more pain. So when someone is taken over by this pain body, they are not themselves, and they are seeking more conflict and anger, and they're going to feed on it. And it's almost like a demon. It's like they're possessed by something. I think this is where probably some of that has come in, in religion. But it's like, this is what's happening. It's this conglomeration of all of these emotions from the past that you're not even aware of. Yes, Gail is saying, I have seen it under different circumstances. Me too. Me too. He says, it would be hard to find a partner who doesn't carry a pain body, right? Before you say, I need to find someone without one, like, look at yourself. You need to work on yours. Yes, Tina says, I've been it and I've seen it. Yes, thank you for admitting that, Tina. We've all been it. We've all had these moments where it's like something takes over you. Like I was talking the other day, I don't know if it came through because I was getting cut off here and there and whatever last week, but of how angry I got because, you know, my partner was like late. We were supposed to be going somewhere and we had an appointment and he wasn't there on time. Now, I don't know if I got to this point where I realized that because I know that he's never on time, I had actually budgeted for the fact that he wasn't going to be on time. And so when I said we had to leave at a certain time, I had actually given us 15 minutes. And so we left at the time that we actually needed to. It was hilarious. I was in the midst of my anger. I realized, I looked at the time and I was like, we're going to be absolutely fine. We're going to get there with enough time to park, make it there, whatever's going to be fine. And I was like, how is that possible? We're late. And I went, oh yeah, Danielle, because you knew he was going to be late, so you planned for him to be late. And then I started laughing. I was like, oh my God, I have made this wild situation where I'm angry and I can't get rid of the anger and it's over nothing. And I already had pre-planned for the lateness and just wild. Okay, just really freaking wild what we do. But my pain body was totally in control. Like the anger was totally, and I even said, because I knew it, I could see it happening in the moment. I'm like, I am pissed. I know I'm pissed. I can't get rid of the anger right now, so it's just going to be here. And the thing is, I just went to Temple of the Universe yesterday. Mickey Singer. So we've done some of Mickey Singer's work here. We read, what did we read? Did we read The Untethered Soul? I think we did. Or Untethered Living. I don't remember which one we read. We read one of his. But anyway, Mickey lives about an hour and a half north of me. And he was talking yesterday, and he said, even the great sages experience, and the enlightened masters experience anger. You're a human being. It's going to come. The thing is, it's just meant to come. It's like, how do you describe it? He said it so beautifully. He said it's like writing an essay on a waterfall, where it comes, but it flows straight through. So the anger comes, but it just goes, and you're just the vessel where it just flows. It flows, it floats, it flows. All right. It's just meant to flow through. It's not that anger is not going to come. It's just when you recognize it, you go, that's not me. And that's just anger and whatever. And you let it be there. And then it will eventually run its course. You don't want to shut it back down because then it'll just come out another time. But you have to just witness it without engaging in the anger, right? It doesn't mean go scream at people. It means witness that you desire to scream, but just let it burn. Okay? I hope that's making sense. I don't know if that Mickey thing made sense. It made a lot of sense in the context of his talk. Not so sure if it made sense here. But anyway. All right. Dense pain bodies. So he's talking about how some people really carry a very dense pain body. And they're unaware of the pain that they're actually carrying inside. And they're so unaware of it. And they project it externally. So to them, because they're unaware that the pain is inside, and they project it onto events and situations. And due to a complete lack of this self-awareness, they cannot tell the difference between an event and their reaction to the event. And this is where a lot of people fall down. So it's really, really interesting to watch how this complete lack of awareness in others, and even sometimes in yourself, right? These moments come, that they cannot tell the difference between an event and the reaction to the event. I mean, it's wild. They're so lost in their own chaos that everything just looks chaotic. It's a crazy thing to see. And I wrote a ton of notes. Always. Wait, that's the wrong page. This page. In these dense pain bodies, yeah, it's really interesting because they're never dormant. And so it's like drama always follows these types of people. Have you seen that with anybody? Yeah. Super, 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 super interesting. So, what are you saying, Lou? Your words, Danielle. Come on, you got your dog, honey, delete the time, the thing, the afraid, I miss you. Yeah. Oh, yeah, the time thing is 100%. It's always your issue. So, I am aware that any issue I have with anyone else is a Danielle issue. But what I was sharing was that in the moment, when something gets triggered in you, sometimes, right, it's difficult to let it go. When it's really intense, it comes with a big punch. And pain bodies have like a life force of their own, right? That's what he's talking about here. How they just seem to just dominate and take over a situation. And unless you bring the light of conscious awareness to them, it's very easy to get lost in them. And so I was just describing the situation where, I was trying to not get lost in my pain body. And then in creating the separation and allowing it to be there, I also laughed at the fact that, oh, you were prepared for this. We knew this was going to happen. So why are you even angry in the first place? And then you look within, right? What is that? Anger, typically, it's a need to control, right? So then you go, oh, there's my need to control things. Oh, okay. I guess I haven't fully worked through all of that. Oh, okay. Let me go deal with that, right? And that's where you have to look, right? These are the things where once you're calm, right? When you're angry, it's not the time to really reflect. But once you calm down, you go, okay, got it, control. Okay, where is that stemming from, right? What am I afraid of? All of these things. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, he gets into other places that the pain body is feeding. And on a societal level, I thought it was really interesting. He talks about how the entertainment industry, the news media as one, but also films. So let me ask you, put a 1 in the chat. Do you like action movies? Are you somebody that likes action movies? You go on a Netflix or Prime or whatever, Hulu, or whatever, and you go to the action section. All right, do you like action movies? Put a 1 in the chat. Do you like horror movies? All right, do you like the dramas? Right? There's a complete category that's just called drama. And are you drawn to crime stories? Are you drawn to learning about murders? It's really interesting. If you stop and you evaluate, it is fascinating how many of us are. All right? It's fascinating, okay? So he was talking about how, if an alien came down or, whatever, somebody that, didn't know our society at all, came in and looked at our society, Eckhart Tolle was saying one of the most shocking revelations would be how obsessed we all are with and the business that is watching other human beings suffer. Isn't it wild? All right. So the question is, what is it within us? What is it within human beings that loves to feel bad? What is it that loves to feel bad and calls it good? It's oh, that was such a good movie, right? Isn't it interesting? He says that's the pain body. It is the pain body within human beings that is the thing that likes to feel bad and believes it's good to feel bad because it thrives on negative energy. It thrives on these things. Violence is everywhere. He talks about, he says pain bodies write and produce these films and pain bodies pay to watch these films. Okay? He says, it's interesting because it's not always wrong to watch violence, but it depends on if they bring the full context. So page 153, I thought was a super interesting point. He says, at the current evolutionary stage of humanity, violence is still not only all pervasive, but even on the increase. You notice that. Look at the wars that are popping up right now. As the old egoic consciousness, amplified by the collective pain body, intensifies prior to its inevitable demise, right? It's always darkest before the dawn. So the ego is going to try as hard as it can to hold on for as long as it can and create as much chaos as intensity before it drops. All right? Tina, you have a question? I'm not sure what the question is. Let me know what the question is. So it's interesting to kind of look at that and go, wow, so what's happening at humanity? People are talking about the Great Awakening, right? A new awakening, people waking up, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's really interesting that if you zoom back and you have this awareness, you can see that, yeah, in order for the awakening to happen, things have to get chaotic, right? Things must crack fully before the truth, before this conscious awareness can come through. There has to be massive unconsciousness before this can come through. Is that making sense? High five me. Put a 5 in the chat if that's making sense. That's interesting. Gail says, I look at it as more of how one thinks. I'm not sure what that was in reference to. How one thinks. Let me see. The current evolutionary state of humanity. Yeah, well, but also our thinking is impacted by the ego, which is, I mean, that is what it does. So he says, the context here, though, about films and violence, he says, if films show violence in the wider context, if they show its origin and its consequences, they show what it does to the victim as well as to the perpetrator. They show the collective unconsciousness that lies behind it and is passed on from generation to generation, the anger, the hatred that lives in humans as the pain body, then those films can fulfill a vital function in the awakening of humanity. I'll repeat it. They can fulfill a vital function in the awakening of humanity because they can act as a mirror in which humanity sees its own insanity. Eventually, you get to the point individually where you say, enough is enough. My mind is causing me complete and utter chaos. And humanity will eventually reach a point that says, enough is enough. What are we doing to one another? And it will help in this collective awakening to see the insanity of the ego. And if put in full perspective, it can be a mirror. He says that in you, which recognizes madness as madness, even if it is your own, is sanity. It's the rising of awareness. It's the end of insanity. As I was reading this, I was thinking about a movie, and I must have seen it 20 years ago, called Crash. Has anyone seen that movie? I almost want to rewatch it because I remember it being my favorite movie for a long time, and people being like, Danielle, it was a terrible movie. And I kept being like, no, it captured the essence of something so beautiful. It was like it followed, I forget exactly, but it followed like several different people, like different races, and it was showing how their lives were interweaving and how things from the past were coming into the present and causing like this like damage because of something that was done in the past, where now in the present moment, you know, it was just like wild to see, right? Exactly what he's talking about, how people's pain bodies get animated, and then boom, as we move into the future, how the past becomes a problem and what we did. And it was so beautifully done. I gotta watch it again. Crash. So I don't know if any of you have seen it, but Moana is more popular than Gladiator 2, so interesting. Yeah, so Mayana, I don't know what that one is, Lou. So, yeah, Charlotte says I can't watch much now. Yeah, well, there are movies that kind of put it in full context, and I really think I'll have to watch Crash again, and I'll recommend it if I can find it. It was like 20 years ago. It was an older movie, but I just remember seeing that like cycle, the interconnection, and how like we're all woven into each other and how much it matters. I just remember that movie just put it in such beautiful perspective. But if you were just looking at like, you know, the director and how things were filmed or whatever, apparently it was not a great movie, but I felt that it was fantastic. All right, did I want to say anything else? The pain body feels, yeah, so when the pain body feels that it's being portrayed as desirable or that violence is being glorified, that's when it creates the negative feelings in you and it becomes a fix for the pain body. But if it's in this larger perspective, it's not so much a fix, it's a mirror. All right, so it's important. There definitely are movies that you can watch because they give the deeper context. But negative emotion sells, right? Tabloids, that's how they sell. Clickbait, like that is how they sell. The media now, it's really just about what can we say that's so outlandish that it gets clicks and we get views. That's what it's come down to. And so they're just selling hysteria and they're creating their own hysteria. It's amazing to watch how the news has just moved more and more and more, and how the internet has sort of caused this, right? Even like traditional news outlets, they're competing now with the internet. And so the news is getting more and more hysterical on TV because they're needing more viewership. It's just wild to watch when you're like zoomed out from it and you're like, whoa, this is what they're doing. And also being a content creator, I know the power of a title. It makes a big difference to if people look at your stuff or not. You have to kind of like speak to the pain body. It's annoying, but that's what right now consciousness responds to. The unconsciousness, I should say, responds to. So anyway, super interesting. He then got into like the collective female pain body, nations pain body, races pain body, like really interesting. Tribes, nations, races, genders, how they can have this collective. And he was talking about this balance between the masculine and the feminine. And if you've taken Inner Management Mastery, that is what I teach in there, is how when you get the masculine and the feminine within you in balance, that's when you're a clear channel to the divine. That's when you open up intuition. That's when you become a powerful leader, a teacher. That's when you become heart-centered, but also like can hold the space of good leadership. We have lost collectively on this planet the balance of the masculine and the feminine. And it's interesting, he kind of paints it in the picture of the ego. He says the male, the masculine is much more easily taken by the ego because male is more doer, which requires the mind. Okay, whereas the female energy is more heart-centered, it's more being-centered, it's more inward focused, whereas male is outward focused. And so the ego is able to more easily take over a man than a woman. All right, super fascinating. And so what has happened over the evolution of humanity, from his perspective, is that the ego saw that it could take over men more easily than women. And so through the male, it started to squash, take out the feminine. He talks about the Holy Inquisition, where somewhere between 3 to 5 million women were killed, burned at the stake, were taken out if they showed love for animals, if they were found walking in a field by themselves, if they used herbs, right, connected it to nature in some way. This sacred feminine was basically, he says, the sacred feminine, this is page 156, the sacred feminine was declared demonic, and an entire dimension largely disappeared from human experience. The divine feminine. It's not talked about much. Still to this day, it's not talked about. It's so interesting, too. Think about the feminist movement. It was making females more masculine. Super interesting when you look at from this perspective. It actually was taking women away from the feminine role. Anyway, there's a whole thing there. But women's status in a lot of cultures and religions, from Judaism to Islam to even Buddhism, women's status were reduced to being child bearers and men's property. Males who denied the feminine, even within themselves, were now running the world, and a world that was totally out of balance. And the rest of history, or rather, is a case history of insanity, which is what has happened. That is where the world has gotten. All right. The ego knew that it could gain full control of our planet only through the male form, and to do so, it had to render the female powerless. And what's interesting is then in time, the ego took over the female. In ancient, like Egyptian culture, Celtic culture, Sumerian culture, like the female was revealed. Yes, Lou, they were healers. Like it was like they were revered. And then something switched. What switched? The evolution of the ego. And the ego realizing that's the threat. The feminine is the threat. And so it can only dominate if it can take over. And now it has. But I thought it was really interesting. He said, this is kind of the hope, right? So I'm not all doom and gloom. He says, with many people becoming more conscious, the ego is losing its hold on the human mind. And because the ego has never as deeply been rooted in women, it is losing its hold on women more quickly than on men. And it's interesting because in these book clubs, in the mastery community, I find it is predominantly women. I find in my spiritual studies here at, the ashram, it's predominantly women that come. There are men, and I'm not saying there's not, but it is predominantly women. And it's an interesting phenomenon that I've always sort of just looked at and went, well, why? And this makes sense. Now, this context makes sense. Women are already more in tune with that. And so when they start to hear these teachings, it resonates faster and deeper. Yeah, they call it Mother Nature. Power, ego, leaders are hurting her. Yeah, exactly. That's how we've hurt nature. It's because we've lost our connection with the feminine. 100%. And we need to bring it back in, which, for those women listening to me right now, that comes through you. And it comes through owning it within yourself and then being that powerful force. Like, a woman that stands in her power is a very powerful force that stands in her feminine power, and then brings in the masculine as needed. It's... watch out. That's all I can say. Watch out. So How about this? For those of you that have traveled, put a 1 in the chat if you have ever gotten off the airplane, walked around. Like whenever I travel somewhere, kind of get off and I just want to walk around in the city, right? Just kind of walk around wherever you are, the village, wherever you are. There's an energy that you feel. And some of these energies are more dense. If you were to go and walk through Cuba, you would feel one way. If you were to go and walk through Italy, you would feel differently. Same with Japan or Germany. All right? And what he was saying was that the collective pain bodies from what these people have experienced that lived in these countries is still felt. It's still tangible. It gets passed on. And so he talks about in the Middle East, right? There's this endless cycle and perpetuation of this retribution. It's keeping needing. This violence is just continuing to cycle there. And then you have other places like Germany or Japan where it's now like it's moved out of this physical manifestation of it, right? The Holocaust was a physical manifestation of some deep-rooted crazy ego. But now they've moved through that. And so it's interesting, and same with Japan, right? There was a lot during World War II. He says it's interesting to desensitize themselves. A lot of this population in both of these countries work a lot. Super interesting. To try and distance from this pain body that is there. It's palpable. Like I remember I studied abroad for a semester in college, and I took a course called Holocaust and Genocide. And as part of the course, we went to a concentration camp in Germany. And I mean, you got off the train and you just started walking around there. You could feel it. I mean, it was like in the air. You could feel the energy of that's the pain body. That's what he's talking about. Interesting, like China should have a very large pain body, but he spoke about how in China, they do Tai Chi. And Tai Chi moves energy. And it helps connect people to that consciousness, to the energy within. And so it helps to actually counter their pain body. Super fascinating. So it feels very different in China, even though it's been very repressed and there's been a lot of murder and there's been a lot of intensity in the Chinese culture. It's countered by Tai Chi. And he talks about how Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, these practices that bring you deeper within help to counter what's there. Super interesting. Like just super interesting to kind of look at this. And he talks about how this global awakening that's happening, those different things are going to support. And I'm looking at the time. We're kind of out of time, but oh my God, there was so much I wanted to say on this. Okay, how to finish up with this. Okay, the interesting thing. So look at American history. There's a lot of talk in American history right now, right? Black Americans, Native Americans. You look at just the Jewish population around the world and persecution that they face. And he said this: the suffering inflicted on Native and Black Americans has not remained confined to those two races, but has rather become part of the collective American pain body. It is always the case that both the victim and the perpetrator suffer the consequences of any act of violence, any act of oppression, any act of brutality. For what you do to others, you do to yourself. We're all one. And so interesting that on a societal level, right, there's all this talk about reparations and paying reparations, to Black Americans. And it's like, it's wild to think, number one, because it was not a lot of white Americans that actually owned slaves. But number two, that like we are all impacted by the seeds with which this country was birthed, both from oppressing Native Americans and basically taking out their culture, and Black Americans with slavery. Super interesting that it actually impacts collectively all of us. We all feel it. And I think you would say that most feel it. Even people that are, come to this country and aren't from this country. Like, there's an aspect of us that understands why things were birthed the way they were here, and it's felt on a collective. So anyway, interesting awareness to bring. He said you can only go beyond, right? Whether your pain body is yours personally, it's part of the American pain body or the Cuban pain body or wherever you're from. And the only way to go beyond it, doesn't matter where it comes from, the only way to go beyond it is by taking responsibility for your inner state right now, moment to moment, in every moment. Instead of blaming others or judging others or pointing the finger externally to some event or something that's happening, you always look within. right? You always look within. And instead of blaming the darkness, right, you just bring the light. You shine the light of awareness. And with the light of awareness, everything just becomes obsolete. It doesn't matter how intense and scary the darkness is. You put a light on, the light does not have to fight the darkness. Like you switch on a flip and darkness is gone. It's just light. It's the same here. You switch on the light of awareness, you realize, phew, I'm more than all of this. And all of a sudden, none of that matters anymore. All right. So, I'm going to put a poll in Telegram to see if you guys want to meet next week. I can meet next week, but some of you, I realize, might be traveling because it's kind of close to the holiday. So I'll put a poll in Telegram, so we'll see if we're here or not. If we're not, we probably won't rejoin until January 6th because I am traveling on the 30th. But we will read Chapter 6, Breaking Free. We're going to go from page 161 to page 172. We will stop at the subtitle there, Unhappiness. So 161 to 172, and we will discuss it. Just pay attention to Telegram. We'll either be back next Monday. I can do it if you all want to. Or we'll be back at the start of the new year. Okay, so I'll chat with you on Telegram. Thanks for being here. Have a wonderful week, all of you. Recognize your pain body. Bring the light of awareness to it, especially as we get into the holidays and you're going to be seeing family and all sorts of things can get stirred up in these dynamics. Your buttons are going to get pushed. See them for what they are. Laugh at it, right? And just let it move through you. All right, best advice I can give you. Lots of love, everybody. I'll see ya.